Welcome back to the Fundraising on the Go, the podcast brought to you by PwC Next Level, where we unravel the mysteries of fundraising for startups. I'm your host, Otito, and I'm excited to have you join us today for the second bonus episode of the Fundraising on the Go podcast. In this second bonus episode, we want to give you some insights into the startup's perspective when it comes to fundraising. That's why we have invited someone special today, Glenn Mathijssen, the CEO and founder of Alberts. Hello, Glenn. Thank you for being here and thank you for joining us on today's podcast.
Thank you very much.
So, can you give us an introduction into Alberts? What is Alberts all about?
Yes, definitely. So Alberts is a scale-up company, Belgian scale-up company. We try to make a healthy life the easiest option. And we do that by working on food robotics solutions. So in this case, we have made a vending machine that can totally, in an automatic way, make a smoothie or a hot soup. What's unique is that we start from raw ingredients, so the real food, let's say. You can also see all the food visually. I'm proud to have a machine here just downstairs as well, so that helps in the experience. And then we place these machines in locations such as companies, universities, hospitals. We try to make a healthy blend the easiest option.
That's fantastic. So we heard a funny story that how you came up with the name of Alberts. Would you like to share how you came up with that name?
Yeah, definitely. So there is actually also still a pre-story to that story. So basically in the beginning we were a bunch of engineers. And so the engineers always end up with the worst marketing names ever. So our first company name was FTFY Labs. The website is still online, and it was Fix That For You Labs. Very commercially unattractive. But then when we had it registered at the notary, we also discovered that on the internet they also call it Fuck That, Fuck You.
Oh my God.
So you might have to bleep that here. So we were like, holy shit, no, we cannot keep it. So then we changed to Frulego. It came from also engineering again. It was from fructoi and legomoi, from the Esperanto for fruit and vegetables. Totally madness, of course. And then now we have a name. So it's Alberts. We say we are no Einsteins, but we are Alberts. We were searching for... basically we were guided by a marketing agency this time and they said, you guys are witty guys, so basically you try to do something smart, clever, but at the same time you're still a little bit funky, and it reminds us of maybe the smartest person ever, who is known for sticking his tongue out on a picture, which is actually so like an oxymoron almost. And yeah, that's how we ended up with Alberts.
Well, that's a very, very interesting story, I must say. I mean, I don't think so many founders have a good story behind how they founded their name.
Okay.
So you are currently fundraising. Can you tell us if you fundraised in the past and how much you're looking to raise right now?
Yes, definitely. So with Alberts, Alberts is a hardware venture at the core. And to build hardware, they say it's hard, so usually a lot of capital is required to get it up to speed. Actually, before Alberts, I had another venture which was totally bootstrapped. And my lesson learned back then was I will never do that again because it was also in hardware, it took a long time. With Alberts now, we have been funded so far with what we then call seed rounds. There was seed 1, seed 2, bridge rounds in between. Basically all the work to get a stable product that could go to market. Today we are at that level and we are now raising what we then call an A round. In a typical story, we are very late with that. In the sense we are 8 years on the road since the ID. In the beginning there was only an ID and some guys without money. So we got it off the ground from zero. But so yes, indeed, we're raising our A round today.
That's fantastic. So at what point in time did you decide that we needed funding? Obviously, you raised capital before. You said to build the product. When did you decide that to say, yes, now is the time we need to raise capital, or at least now we need to start to raise capital?
Yes, there are probably a lot of sophisticated answers, but the real truth is when the money's gone, you need new money. To maybe frame it a little bit more into our development, we in the seed rounds, like I said, we really focused very much on developing something and pushing it to the market as fast as we can. Now, as fast as we can means food safe, of course, because we're still dealing with food and serving people. So we really took a super iterative approach, have a first prototype, push it on the market, reiterate, push it on the market, reiterate, push it on the market. And this whole track was then funded with seed funding. We had then the last round, seed round was a bigger size round. This was to set up our first production. So we now have a production ready in Belgium, of all places. Elon Musk can be right about many things and wrong about many things, but certainly he's right about that design is easy, but production is hard. So we went now through that phase, which was a very hard phase, requires a lot of capital as well and takes a long time. So now this is ready. Yesterday I went on a little celebration with our production partners, so all is good at that point. And so we said, okay, this is the perfect time to raise money, not per se for the external economical climate, because the economy is going southwards, and also on startup funding already 2 years is very hard. But at least from an Albert's point of view, we are stronger than ever. We have a product that's ready for market. We have first clients on a scalable model, and we have a production that is ready. So for us now is the perfect time to try to raise the money required to scale it through this time.
Okay. And do you think this will be the last time you're going to raise capital, or do you foresee that you're going to raise capital sometime in the future?
Very, very good question. So this is actually the first time that I can confidently say to investors, after this round, we will be able to choose what we do, aka we will be cash flow positive. I personally think that if we follow the plan as we do it now, there will be an itching ambition with all the investors to go bigger and go faster and go to other continents and maybe develop new products as well. So I believe there will be rounds after it, but we will go to a profitable state, meaning that we can choose ourselves what we want to do.
Okay, that's fantastic. And obviously, going into your fundraising, there's a lot of preparation you would have to do. Can you just walk me through what the preparation for this particular fundraising round was like?
Yeah, actually, this was the most interesting from a preparation point of view. So maybe a little background to it. So far, we have raised all the rounds ourselves, meaning that we did not have any external support. There was some minimal support here and there, but I mean not a fully structural mandate. Like I just explained, this time we are actually with the business now, let's say, exploding in a good way, onboarding many new clients, new machines. So we decided, okay, if we want to do this fundraising decently, we really will need support this time. That's also how we ended up with PwC working together. For us, the biggest preparation this time was basically onboarding the full team of PwC in the plans we already had, the vision we had, the preparations we had, and then merging that towards a professional data room that is ready for investors to check in. So for us, it was basically the biggest prep for us was literally opening ourselves towards a new team, which was the first time that we do it. So that was special this time.
That's great. And we enjoy working with you as well.
All right. I hope so.
So obviously there are clear differences in how you raise capital in the preparation done in the seed round and now preparations done in the Series A round.
Yes.
Obviously you mentioned one of the differences is that you're now working with advisors with the help with the Series A round. But were there any other differences that you could see maybe in how you are raising the seed round and how you are raising the Series A round that you would like to share with us? Yeah,
definitely. I think from what I've learned in the last years, and there's an important disclaimer, I'm only one opinion, of course, and also only my experience is extensive overall the last years, but also limited. So maybe important for the listeners to know, we have raised capital with all types of investors except for VCs. So we have been raising at pure business angels in the beginning, then let's say at very large business angels more in the later stages. But we also have a CVC fund, so corporate venturing fund. We also have raised money from institutional investors, European level. So very broad, dynamic family funds also. So very different types of investor, but never VC. I think it's also in hindsight, I think it's also almost an indication of the level where we were and where we were not, mainly. To be honest, I think all the investors today, and some of them literally told me that as well, they all said, you know what, actually we only invested because we believed in the management team. We believed in the founders, of course the idea as well, but we thought these guys are so passionate, they're really going to pull it off, so let's give them a try. This time, of course, it is way more serious. Stefan, co-founder Stefan, he's a trade engineer, and we have been working on the most insane Excels from, let's say, day one. But definitely true that this time, this is where it really matters. Okay, what is the real scaling model? How trustable is that? What are the parameters that might differentiate the outcomes? What's the risk analysis? How how stress-worthy is the whole plan. So this is way more important this time. Of course, there is still also the capacity of the management team and the broader team. Of course, there is still the concept and etc. But this time, numbers matters, contracts matters way more than in the past. I do still think in the past it was also important, but this time it's really different. It's way more on that.
You mentioned something how previously you worked with a variety of investors, from business angels to corporate VCs to other kinds of investors. How was that juggling this different variety of investors for you? How was that experience like?
Yeah, it's the experience of a lifetime, I would say. So, it's actually still an ongoing experience, because there is, of course, onboarding investors, but there's also maintaining relations with investors. Also with Alberts, it's a very, with the management team from day one, it's a very personal experience. Also in the beginning, there was only us, so you're selling, of course, or you're promoting or the concept and the idea and the visionary product, but in the end also yourself. So it has been a very personal roller coaster, I would almost say. I do believe that up until now, I believe that all the relations that we've kept with investors are positive on two sides. On one side, from our side, I still feel that we have a very open and transparent and honest relationship with all the investors, from the first one till the last one. And what you see in the end, although it's institutional or it's an angel or whatever, in the end it's always people who trust people. So behind every institutional there are people, and behind every CVC there are also people. So from that perspective, I feel that we really managed to get a good relationship, very one-on-one with the people behind all these organizations. Another big disclaimer is also that so far we've raised only money from Belgian investors, so very local, except for the institutional from Europe then, and some individuals from abroad. So it means also that there was a very, one-on-one network relationship. We always knew somebody via somebody else, via that person. So far it was a lot oriented about the network, about the one-on-one relationship, about the passion, and about the trust with each other.
Yeah. I think I like what you said about how you view the investors, that there are people behind this. And I think that's a very good approach. And I think a lot of startups don't think about that. When they just see VCs or they see corporate, they just think of them as like machines or something like that. But I think it might be worthwhile to have that perspective, that there are people behind this, and you have to impress those people when you need to raise funds.
And maybe just adding something shortly, I think also something that I call in the team is always the N+1 thinking. So you're always talking with somebody, but that somebody seems like, okay, so you talk with the VC, so you think I have to convince the VC. But actually the person you talk to has to convince their investment team.
Yeah.
So actually they're on your side because they also want to get a deal through.
Yeah.
So actually you're trying to do the same, but you just think I have to convince him or her. But in reality, he or she also has to convince the other people. So it's always an N+1 or N+2 game. But it's the same in sales, so it's the same in everything in the end, but definitely also in investor.
Very interesting. And looking at your fundraising journey right now, because you've raised previously as well, when you're looking back, are there things you will have done differently? Say, for example, in your seed round funding, are there things you would have done differently? And maybe you can share one or two of those things that you will have done differently.
Yeah, definitely. There are like tons of anecdotes. Maybe, so one thing, I think the main learning for me is that if you want to hit a target, you have to shoot enough. And basically, we don't shoot enough. So as a founder, you're busy with a lot of stuff. You are doing sales, you're doing team management, you're doing tech development, if it's a tech startup, etc., like a lot of stuff. And then, we're also fundraising. As a result, you feel that you're spending way too much time on fundraising because should I not be working on the product or whatever? But the point is that if you're going to spend time on fundraising, you're going to do it massively. So you're going to send to 100 investors, try to build relations with 100, and then maybe convince one. In reality, I believe startup founders very often just don't shoot enough, do not reach out enough, do not maintain enough relationships. Also for us in many of the earlier rounds. As a result, and that's maybe the second learning, you sometimes end up in some tracks with a potential investor where you start believing yourself, or you start telling yourself that it's going to work out. Because the alternative to that is, again, in the Wild West, having to go search for new targets, which you think, oh my God, it will take so long and we have so much work. So you telling yourself it will work out. And maybe a small anecdote. So we had twice with a I don't remember, I think with a 3 or 4 year difference and with totally different people. So 2 times an identical situation, but totally different people at a total different moment, where on Monday we would go to the notary to sign in all the deeds and everything. So literally the round is then closed, except for the fact the money still has to go to the account.
Yeah.
The round is only closed if the money is on an account you can access. This is the golden rule.
Very true.
So this is the learning, because it was on Monday twice, and then twice on Sunday around 10 o'clock in the evening. We received an email from one of the person. It was an individual investor twice who wants to join, who wrote us, actually I've been thinking, then still got out of the round. So the implications of that is way further than, oh, one guy is not joining anymore. No problem. No, of course, the whole deal changes. You have to call everybody. Everybody says, why is he not joining? Is there maybe something? And both, it was for very personal reasons. So both had actually very little to do with Albert's. It was them making a personal decision. But of course, you have to go explain that to everybody. So I think the learning there is twice. So firstly, it's not over till it's over, and that means the money is on an account you can access. And then secondly, also at a certain, because with both of these investors, somehow in the back of our minds, we knew that it was like, yeah, they actually already doubt a little bit personally from the start, but they really liked it and you want it, so you go through this journey together. But then twice it happened that they still snitched out at the last moment. In the end, it was still all good. Both rounds went further, were completed then with a week delay. But still, I think the lesson learned is if it somehow feels off, then it's probably off. So just keep searching then next to it, and then maybe it still works out and you were lucky. But if it feels a bit off, it's probably off.
I really like that. So part of the process is also trusting your gut feeling.
Yes.
Sometimes if it's off, then it's most likely
a lot. But do not trust your gut to say maybe it will work out. Keep shooting. So always keep shooting. Or until you stop.
Okay. And how did you determine an investor was the right fit for you? Obviously, you obviously did your research. You reached out to the right investors. But then again, when these conversations happened, how did you know that? This is the person I would like to work with.
Yeah, I think just like investors told me, in hindsight, actually we always invested because we believed in the team. I think in the end it was for us the same. All the investors that we onboarded in all of these years, always we literally just loved the person. I think I can definitely name some first names. So for example, our lead investor today is a wealthy individual. And his name is Chris. Honestly, at the first moment, I loved him. He was just a perfect match at an event, and he was so energetic, and our characters matched so well. And 3 days later, he already visited us. While he's super busy, he was 3 days later in a supermarket in Brussels looking at our machine. When he saw it, he started screaming, literally screaming in the store, that I was really thinking, oh my God, like people will kick us out here, because he was so enthusiastic. After 1 second, I was like, okay, this is like a personal match. We will love each other. And then we went to go for a coffee in the closest thing we could find, because we didn't have an office then in Brussels. And then we went to Lunch Garden. It's not the most attractive place to with all due respect, of course, but it's not the most business place. And we were 5.5 hours there, drinking coffee. And afterwards, we were so tired. We only did talking and listening, and then you already know, okay, this is probably. It still took more than a year to really get started together, but already after that meeting, I was like, this is going to be something in some sort.
Okay, that is very, very interesting. And obviously, when those conversations evolve, there has to come to a point where you start to negotiate what the deals are and what terms you want, especially in your term sheet. Are there particular things that for you are a priority when you're negotiating one of those deals, one of the fundraising deals?
Yes, I think we have some really cool learnings there, and many of the things happened by total luck. So many of the things I say, we were just very lucky. So when we were fundraising the first time, it was in the beginning. So first we put all our own money into the company, but that was back then. Our savings were like 38,000 euros. So we put that all on the company account that was then created. And then after that, we made a prototype and we started fundraising. So basically, sorry, the question was? I got lost.
The question was like, when you're negotiating, obviously, are there things that you prioritize when you're negotiating?
Yes.
The terms.
So very big learning is that the first I believe the first shareholders agreement is the most important one, because people always have a tendency to at least start from where it is already the status or the status quo. Of course, some investors, if the situation is really in their favor, they will say, I delete everything what was there, I make my own terms. But usually, if you have like good investors already on board, and there is a shareholders agreement with these investors, it's very weird for a new investor to come on board and say, okay, my rules, I delete everything here. Like, it's a very weird dynamic. So the first shareholders agreement, I believe, is the most important. And usually it's at the moment where a team could still be the most unexperienced. So in our case, we were very lucky because a friend of my co-founder, Philip, he was working at one of the bigger lawyer offices in Brussels, where we still work today, also together with PwC, Van Olmen and Wijnand. And we got very lucky that as such we could really talk directly with the owner, so with the owner himself, with Luc himself, and as such we were in very good hands. It's a very renowned office also, where we by total chance ended up. And I still remember that we had another person that wanted to help us, somebody way less experienced with startups, more like an individual lawyer, who said, yeah, let's do this, and then it would be cheaper or whatever. In the beginning you're thinking like that, but I'm so happy that we went to trust the lawyer office. And then we had a very, very good first shareholders agreement that was very balanced, and we always worked on from that, and stuff changed and stuff were added. I think the most, to be honest, on all the terms, it is so case by case that I think I'm always very careful with giving real advice, because every situation is so different. And then there is maybe one thing I think as a founder you have to be careful for avalanche effects in the future that you don't foresee now. So for example, is if there's a leak pref that is like ×4 or ×5, all of like something crazy, then you think it's nothing until it really happens, and then in the end it can really still kill your whole story. So I think just if there is a little bit of a balance and a reasoning, then case by case you have to evaluate. Is something you want to expect? But if it's something outrageous with a multiple of 5 effect that you really don't want, that's maybe not where you want to go for.
Very interesting. And how do you, so now you've been working with investors, and very soon you'll be having new investors on the team. How do you maintain this relationship with these investors? So you've been in the business now for about 7 to 8 years now, and the goal is that Albert keeps on growing and growing for a very long time. So you have this investor relations you have to do. How did you manage it so far, and what do you plan to do in the future to maintain these relationships?
Yes, so I think in the beginning of your ride, usually it's a very personal story. So it's I think the best thing there is still to grab the phone from time to time. So of course you're going to work in a structured way. You're going to have a board. You're going to have board reports. You're going to have financial reporting, etc. So of course you install this ASAP because it creates all the trust. Also, again, the N+1, the one that is actually your fund manager, let's say, that is managing your file. He or she needs to report. So he or she wants to report, so he or she can report. Not only to read them, him or herself, but to be able to report. I think in the beginning is very personal is the best. You do a lot of phone calls, or now it's Teams then. You try to visit, let them taste in all the development as much as possible. That can, in our case, is food. So be tasted, be felt. If there is a client contact that you know, that they know, try to get them in touch. So, there's a lot of, that they can create a lot of trust just by feeling it. And then I think more and more over time there's so much to do that you cannot keep up with all these calls. So then you more and more evolve to a more business approach, where the board meetings are really the anchor points, where there could be one-on-ones, but it's more structured and it's more maintained. But honestly, in the beginning, I think it's really literally treat them as a friend, as somebody you trust, and somebody that they trust you, and try to be as close as possible to, without of course wasting your time. There is time to be spent on other stuff, but it can literally be a phone call of 10 minutes, which also investors do with me very often when they call me. They're in the car just to ask, how's it going, what's up, what's the latest, and then it's 5 or 10 minutes. I'm good, then we're off.
Okay, that's great. So obviously there's a lot of balancing acts, being the founder and CEO, managing investor relationships, but I think one of the important things is that you are fundraising. You mentioned this earlier on, but you also have to focus on running the business as well. How do you balance this? How do you ensure that you are fundraising, because that's important for your growth, but at the same time you don't want the business to fail? How do you manage this?
So it's a very, very thin line. You don't want to be your company. You don't want to have a company that's only there because you're all the time fundraising. So you really, of course the market will hit you at a certain point, so that's not it's just a timing game. I think how you balance it in a team is, if you have a founding team, some people are also solo, but if you have a founding team, try as soon as possible to dedicate one person to do the investor relations. As such, the other two are like free of it, and they can only jump in, of course, in the board calls and the important stuff. But then there's one person who always picks up the phone and answers. It does mean that that one person really has to do that very well, because it becomes a one-on-one relationship with many people. So if you F that relationship up, then of course bigger trouble arises for everybody. So you have to be careful as well. But I think point one. And then let's be honest, certainly in the growth stages, certainly in the beginning, like you need to manage, like cash is king. So you don't have to be ashamed of saying, yes, I spend time on fundraising and investor relations. Yes, it takes quite some time. What I try to do always is to somehow, literally, like I say, I take it, like if you're proactive, you can schedule it like you want. If you're reactive, then it comes in between everything. So you can text an investor, say, hey, shall we call next week? What about Tuesday at 2? Okay, good. Then it also fits nicely your schedule. You can do 15 minutes, have it a bit prepared, send that preparation to 3 or 4. Then at least as such, you win time. But it does take time. It's very easy.
Yeah, and you're growing in terms of the number of employees. How do you prepare your employees for new investors who are probably going to bring in new influences, new ideas? Is there any preparation you do towards that? Do you let them know to?
We had one case like that actually. So firstly, I try to limit the amounts that I say because we're meeting an investor or because the investors are coming. But I do recognize that it's very often the case. Like something is happening, or we have a visit of an investor who has another friend who wants to see a machine. In our case, then preparation time is needed. So, but with regards to like real structural changes, I think it's very important as the founders that you very clearly define yourself. Where do we want to go? And not fall into the trap that any investor that comes on board can start changing anything, because very, very quickly you will have them hitting each other. We did have a very fundamental exception where we did make an exception on that rule. That was exactly also when Chris came on board. That's also the reason why it took a year to get started together. I say a year, I don't know exactly, but I estimate a year. When we've met, like I said, after 5 minutes, I already thought, wow, this is so fantastic. Like, I hope we can do something together. But then it still took a long time because Chris wanted to expand our product offering. So we were offering in the beginning only smoothies. Chris was very keen on adding a hot drink to it, and then specifically soups. So that is, of course, from a product compatibility, perfect, because you have the hot and you have the cold and you have the savory and you have the sweet. So it's perfect to balance out seasonality effects, etc. So we loved it. We really loved it. But we were just technically, we knew it's not that easy. Making a soup from raw ingredients that are frozen in 2.5 minutes, 2 minutes is really difficult. So that's why for a very long time we were very hesitant. In the end, we accepted, and this was a big risk, actually. But we trusted it because we really trusted Chris, because we met so many times. We created a daughter company. So we made Alberts as a group, a daughter company, which there was an investment being made in. And then over time, we pivoted that company back all together. But that was actually a risk, because at that point, we had 2 boards. We were reporting to 2 boards who had 2 different inputs. So the one board said, what does the soup board want to do? So this was very complex. We knew very well upfront that this was very complex. This was also in the height of the start of COVID. So of course there was also some stress on many factors there. But so yes, COVID pushed us maybe to that decision. But very important is that we really trusted Chris, that he had all the best intentions, and that is a risk. Because maybe it could be different. And also time can change and stuff can change and focus can change. But we managed, and then what we said to the team, sorry to answer to your question, we've prepared the team that soups was coming. Now, in general, everybody loved that because the whole team loves to make healthy blends and soup is great. So let's do it. But we prepared them and we said we absolutely, without any exception, want to make it as such that one machine can make both, because we don't want to end up with 2 companies and 2 products. So we want one. And that was the biggest thing. And we then explained them also why. And then all together, we worked very hard towards getting it all in one, which then in the end worked. And then company also is now back nicely one board. So, and good, all good. And then we called the product that we have now, or the solution is now the Alberts One. But because it also somehow represents this unification again. But this was a very big exception to the rule. Don't let an investor totally guide where you're going. And the exception is, unless you really believe it's the right move. If you think yourself, yes, let's do that. So, yeah, that was, I think, in hindsight, a very big risk. But at the moment, it did not feel like it. Also, with the management team, we have this philosophy. We think about it very well. Then we make a decision, and then we never regret, because you can regret forever.
So you made a decision based on the information you have.
And we knew exactly the risks it would entail. We shared it also with the board that this was a bit complex and it could really create trouble. And everybody said, yes, but let's do it. Okay, good, let's do it. And then we went for it.
That's nice. I think from this conversation so far, there's something that has happened, you said reoccurring, and I think maybe it's also fundamental in terms, I guess, for your whole fundraising journey, is the fact that you mentioned how important it is to trust your investors.
Trust is everything.
And I think that's something that I've heard you say over and over again.
Trust is key. Yeah.
So would you say it's you must be able to trust your investor before you can collect their money from them? Yeah,
I think 100%, because in the end, people say, yeah, but we have a contract or we have paperwork, but there are a zillion ways to have the same. I mean, if somebody really wants something, there are a zillion ways to start being annoying or delaying or whatever. So, of course, you still need the paperwork, of course, and of course, you still need a very good shareholders agreement, of course. But in all the years with Alberts, we even never had a real decision vote in the board where it was really like a tie. It was always somehow consensus driven, and of course in the discussion there was
debates,
of course, yes, and then there were different viewpoints, and some were then, but in the end it was still okay, let's go that way. Okay, we all agree we go that way. And that is so yes, I believe a lot in that trust factor. But like I said also, and that's important, we also have the experience, like we don't have the experience today with pure VC. More CVC, so I think it's still different than at a certain point, but I really still value this trust factor very high.
Very good. So, did you always want to be a founder, right from time? Did you always wanted to? Did you dream when you were 10 years old? Oh, I'm going to start a company called
Alberts.
Yeah, it's called Alberts. Yeah. Was that always the dream? How did you pivot from to becoming a founder and CEO?
I don't know. So the answer is no. My family, so my grandparents were farmers, and then my parents were workermen in the harbor and in a pharmacy, an assistant. So there is no like big entrepreneurial experience in the family, except for farmers who are entrepreneurs by default. But so no, I think in hindsight, looking back for me it was always clear that looking back, I mean that there were some key characteristics that I always had. Already very young, in the soccer team, for example. I always like to take the lead. I always like to be the motivator of a group. I always like to say, if somebody says not possible, to be the one that says, yeah, no, we can do that. This is not a problem. We can make it happen somehow. And then this regret factor, I think, is also a weird characteristic, maybe even, but I never really regret. There were things I did regret, of course, in my life, but the things that I well thought about, I never regretted, let me say it like this. There were some unthoughtful decisions. So in hindsight, looking back, and also I always had a very drive to somehow be independent, not like an obsession, but just natural. I always wanted to take care of myself in a way. So yeah, when I did my engineering studies because I wanted to be free to decide my own future and do what I want. And then somehow I ended up doing a PhD, which I actually didn't want. But the only reason why I wanted it, because it was a fully new idea from zero. And then I actually treated it almost like a startup together with the professor. We were only two, Bram van der Borgt, and then there were many grants that we gained. So actually that was a little bit of a startup. But while I was doing my PhD, I already had a first startup, the bootstrapped one. Then Albert started as well, and then I was doing a master in management, so many things at the same time. My life exploded. And then also a girlfriend from Germany, so then my life was totally exploded. So I stopped everything except for the girlfriend and Albert, and then not stopped, I mean finished PhD, finished master, sold the first company, and then
started Alberts as well. Okay, that's very interesting. So any final advice you would have to startup founders who are looking to fundraise?
Very good question. So the biggest one I think is shoot a lot and don't be influenced by people like, should you not be working more on your product? Yeah, maybe yes. If you find your investor, sure, then sign it in and go work. But if not, yes, it is important that cash flow keeps going. So keep shooting. Trust each other a lot. And Yeah, literally the one thing I think is get out of the door. Get out of the door. We found, I believe, every single investor by somehow getting out of the door. By getting on an event where we met a person who saw a guy who, like literally, I think literally every single one of them. So get out of the door. People need to see your face. And again, with a small side remark that we are so far not dealing with VCs and pure VCs. But I think literally get out of the door. Get out of the door. Show your product everywhere, even if it's a preliminary product. Do pitches everywhere. Go to all types of events. Talk to everybody. We talk about what we do to everybody. I cannot go to a barbecue without people thinking after 5 minutes, oh my God, he's talking about it again. But in the end, stuff will come to you, and what you preach will somehow then hopefully in the end come to you.
And finally, just before we go, so everybody is listening to this is now saying, oh, where can I get my own smoothie? So where can they find one of your machines to?
Very, very good question. So we have most machines in Belgium. The most publicly accessible are in Decathlon, because otherwise I have to become client of PwC. It will be difficult. So Decathlon Antwerp and Decathlon Schelle at the A12. And then we have in UK one machine, a second one, and then in the Netherlands, in Maastricht and in Groningen. So slowly expanding. You can download the app. Albert's Smoothie is usually leading you to the app if you type it in the app stores. So
That is fantastic. So thank you so much, Glenn, for sharing your experience and advice on fundraising. We wish you all the best with Albert's. And we'll definitely buy a smoothie the next time we run into the Albert's machine. Actually, I'll do that when I'm going downstairs right now. I haven't had lunch yet. So, dear listeners, this episode was the very last part of the Fundraising on the Go podcast. I want to thank you for listening. And more importantly, I hope you learned some valuable lessons on fundraising. Good luck with all your entrepreneurial endeavors, and I hope we meet again real soon. Thank you.